now. And now record has shifted from my screen. Okay, great. I've got it. Okay. And we are recording.
Great, thank you. So this is the Council Policy and Procedure Committee meeting of September 28th. And during this declared state of emergency, this meeting is being conducted in accordance with California Government Code Section 54953E as authorized by resolution. Please contact City Clerk at mountainview.gov to obtain a copy of the applicable resolution. All members of the Council Policy and Procedures Committee will participate in the meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the live meeting may do so, and I'm just going to say via links on the city's website, because if you're here, you already know them. Members of the public wishing to comment on an item on the agenda may do so in several ways. You could have emailed city.manager@mountainview.gov prior to the meeting. You can provide oral comments during this meeting. And if you are doing that via Zoom, well, you're here already, so I don't think I need to read that. But when the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raise hand feature in Zoom. Speakers will be notified of their turn shortly before they are called on to speak. And if you are participating via phone, when the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, dial *9. Phone participants will be called on by the last few digits of their phone number. And when the chair calls your name to provide public comment, if you are participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, so with that, we will call the meeting to order at 2:03. And if we could have a roll call for attendance.
Committee Member Hicks.
Here.
Committee Member Ramirez.
Here.
And Chair Matichak.
Here. Thank you. Next on the item is number 3, the minutes approval. And those are the minutes from the November 30th, 2021 meeting. Are there any corrections or comments from members of the committee? Nope. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on the minutes? I don't see any hands raising. So Mayor Ramirez.
We'll move to approve the minutes.
Vice Mayor Hicks.
I second that motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and we will do a roll call vote.
Committee Member Hicks.
Yes.
Committee Member Ramirez.
Yes.
Chair Matichak.
Yes. Thank you. We will move on to item 4, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. And I see one hand, Bruce England. Let's see, do I need to do anything? Mr. England, we can't hear you if you're talking, but do I need to do anything to unmute him or anything?
He's not muted.
Oh, now he is. There he is.
Bruce, hopefully.
You should be able to speak now.
Yes, just got the message. You hear me now?
Oh, great, great.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I'm hearing some echo. Okay, it went away, good. Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. I have several questions, and I know that none of these are on the agenda, so I think these are things where I'm requesting that they be placed on a future agenda. But just a sec. Okay, here we go. So I'm wondering who develops questions for advisory body interviews. I know that there's static questions that are asked, but I have not seen an opportunity to weigh in on that. That's the first one. Request for advisory body handbook updates around residency requirements. There was a recent change made for the PSAB, and those changes might be reflected in a future update to the handbook. I would like to see TALs for all the advisory bodies, a tentative agenda list for all. Some advisory bodies do it, some don't, but it would be nice to have consistency. There's also inconsistency on on responses to public comments during meetings. I know that questions can't be answered, but there can be some response. This is also inconsistent across advisory bodies. As much feedback to members of the public as possible would be great. There's some kind of means for advisory bodies to regularly report back to council. That's not in place at the council meetings. And also, I'm almost done. As much as possible, if meeting packets can be available before the weekend, that would be great, because oftentimes people only have the weekends to work on it. There was discussion at the BPAC about responding to Zoom comments, in the chat and so on. And I think that the city attorney has said that that should be turned off, but apparently it's happening anyway. And so I don't know if you want to discuss that. And lastly, and I've said this before in other meetings, but the means for advisory bodies to consider legislation recommendations back to city council, that didn't show up on any of their work plans for the fiscal year. And my request is that that be included by council, a direction over to the advisory bodies to include that in their work plans, or at least consider it, because most, if not all, the advisory bodies could benefit from being able to provide that input. That's a lot, but I'm done.
Thank you very much. I think I captured it all. And I don't see any other attendees. So we will close item 4 and we'll move on to item 5.1, which is consideration of revisions to City Council Policy D13.
And Lindsay Bishop will be giving that report.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll go ahead and start by sharing my screen. Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Today we'll be discussing recommended revisions to Council Policy D13, a Mountain View Employee Homebuyer and Relocation Assistance Program. While this policy outlines the relocation program in addition to the homebuyer program, today's recommendations are solely related to the homebuyer program. In the presentation, we'll briefly review the major elements of the current program and then walk through the loan provisions for which staff is recommending revisions to address recent challenges with these provisions and to provide administrative flexibility in responding to employee and participant needs. Okay, so the current policy that stands today was revised in 2019 to support organizational goals, including those listed here. Those listed here are the goals that today's recommendations are intended to further support. So in terms of recruitment and retention, it's been discussed as employees establishing themselves in the community may elect to work longer for the city with community ties established and also with better work-life balance, including reduced commute time. In terms of housing market challenges, housing continues to be a challenge for those in and around Mountain View, including the attainability of home ownership. And that challenge is no different for our employees. And then in terms of including increasing the participation in the program, this is a consideration as we look at the provisions and ensure that the program is valuable, it's attainable, and it's flexible to include reasonable parameters without creating unattainable barriers. And then lastly, in terms of streamlining administration, we're looking at including including reasonable parameters by reducing the frequency of exceptions that must go before council. Council may recall that the last 2 loans issued under this policy recently required council action due to restrictions in the current policy. So that kind of informs us to where we are. A brief view here of the current program overview. There are 3 home loan categories as outlined here. Staff is not recommending changes to the categories you see here or to the loan amounts. In addition, staff is not recommending changes to the proximity to Mountain View, but instead will be requesting to confirm the clarification of how proximity is determined, and to make recommendations related to the other loan provisions. Okay, so this slide outlines the provisions brought before you today for consideration. I'll summarize each one of these, and then after this slide, I'll conclude the presentation and welcome discussion. So in terms of the provisions recommended for all employee loans, attached to the memo distributed last week was a map. When council approved the revised policy in 2019, this map was attached to the report. However, it may have been unclear whether the radius was determined by commute miles or general miles, as outlined on the map attached. So staff is recommending confirmation of the general radius map, and that GIS would be used to satisfy the requirement of proximity to Mountain View. In terms of the interest-only payment periods, the current policy includes a 3-year provision. Prior policies have included between a 5- and 7-year provision to allow for additional flexibility. Requests for interest-only payments in the recommendation from staff, the requests for interest-only payments would be reviewed as set forth in administrative guidelines for the program. The city would ensure that recipients are aware of how this would impact their future payments for principal. And in addition, consideration would be made as to the ability for the city to recover payments from participant employee paychecks and industry standards such as equity in the home, housing market conditions, and any impact to being able to provide future loans through this program. The provisions, the last 2 provisions for council appointee and department head loans have both been prompted by the city's recent experience administering loans in accordance with the current policy provision. The current policy requires that 10% equity is established in the home, which may be reduced for department heads to 5% by the city manager. In recognition that in some cases, including in the most recent council appointee loan, the city's loan will not exceed the loan amount available to other employees. In this case, first responders have a loan amount limit of $500,000, and first responders do not have an equity requirement. So in accordance with this, staff recommends removing the equity requirement entirely for council appointees and department heads in the case that the city's loan does not exceed the $500,000 for consistency in the issuance of loans up to this amount for other employees. And then lastly, the subordinate loan requirements. To date, the provision that any additional loan be subordinate to the city's loan has been difficult to obtain, thereby reducing the chances of a successful home purchase. Staff recognizes this can be a barrier to participation and is in contrast to one of the main program goals regarding participation. As such, staff is recommending removing this provision for council appointees and providing the city manager discretion to waive this provision in the instances in which it would prevent a department head from successful home purchase under the program. In balancing the risk to the city, this approval would be limited to a secondary loan position for the city's loan and would only be extended after a good faith effort to obtain a loan subordinate to the city's. So I'm going to pause there and take us out of this to open for discussion and questions. If anyone would like to see any of the slides again, please let me know. I'll be happy to bring them up.
Great, thank you. So are there any questions from committee members? So I had a few. Do you know what the industry standard is for the term of interest-only payments?
I'm going to pause there and see if that's something that Jesse can speak to.
Yes, hi, Jesse Takahashi, the Finance Administrative Services Director. Thanks for the question. So there are interest-only standards in the industry. So that is a common provision in a lot of loans for a limited period of time. A lot of them are in adjustable rate mortgages where people have an initial period of time to grow into it. So this is a little different in that the interest rate would not be adjustable, but be fixed. But otherwise in the industry there, that is a fairly common provision.
So sorry, I guess I was asking, what is the most common length of time that it is interest only on a typical interest only loan? Is it
Oh.
5 years? Is it 10 years?
So I think it's up. I've seen up to 10 years, but again, those are on adjustable rate mortgages, and so there's they work a little bit differently. There's more risk both ways, and so the longer you go out, there is a more potential that your interest rate could go down, but also more likely generally will go up, can go up. So
Right.
it varies. Yeah, anywhere up to maybe 10 years.
So, but did I just hear you say that you don't usually see interest only on a fixed interest rate loan?
No, I think what I said is the one that is in our program would not adjust. So it would be a fixed loan versus the ones in the industry typically are associated with adjustable mortgages, where the interest rate does fluctuate. So depending upon when, that period ends, that could then lock in whatever rate is at that time.
Right, yeah, so I get that. So for ARMS, you often have an interest only loan for a period of time. I guess I don't know what industry standard practices are for fixed rate loans, how many years you might have the option to pay interest only. So, but I'll move on. On page 2 of the draft policy, it says the interest only period could be up to 7 years and assessed on a case-by-case basis. So who actually does the assessment and how is the decision made?
Thank you for that question. So the policy, as outlined in the policy, at the end of the policy, the administrative guidelines are created and approved by the city manager. So this would be established in the administrative guidelines so that it can be reviewed by expertise staff in terms of the different provisions, not only in terms of the participants' ability to pay. So that would be one thing. So the payments are required to come out of the paycheck. So there would need to be an assessment that would be by city staff of the employee's paycheck and other liabilities that come out of the paycheck. And if there is, if it's conducive to the request for the interest only in terms of how it would impact the future payments. And then there would also be, we're proposing some review of industry best standards regarding equity and loan provisions. And so in that case, staff would be requesting assistance from outside expertise.
Okay, so it could be that the terms are different for different employees.
Potentially.
Okay. I'm curious why it's broken out into 2 periods, 3 years, and then you can ask for up to 7. Is like 3 years automatic?
Typically, yeah. So the current policy allows for the request for up to 3 years and doesn't request a review. Often, someone's situation doesn't change as quickly or as drastically, significantly, I would say, within a 3-year period, whereas things may change more over a 7-year period. So not only is it a larger impact or a bigger difference to the future payments, employees, just as any individuals, may have changes in their situations. And so it allows the city to assess essentially closer to the time at which the principal payments would start, whether or not additional interest only could have impacts that should be considered.
Is that how the previous policy was when you said it was 7 years? It was broken into 2 buckets?
No, so there were 2 different previous policies that were separate, one for all employees and then one for department heads and council appointees. And I believe the one for department heads and council appointees did not have a tiered system, had different provisions. I'd have to look those up, had different provisions to safeguard that review in the review of that based on the loan provisions, but it was not in a tiered approach to review. And the employee, the prior employee policy for a loan up to $100,000 was 5 years and did not have a review period.
Okay. And then the interest rate, I know it's, well, I thought it was just the long-term AFR rate. But when I read this again, it says it's based on the AFR. And so I'm wondering, is it a variation of AFR and who decides, or is it just the AFR at the time you take out the loan? How does it work?
Thank you for that question. I'm gonna defer there. Jesse, can you speak to that?
Yes, so the policy indicates that it's the AFR at the time that the loan is originated. So that would be when basically upon closure of the purchase and when that loan is made.
Okay. And it's the long term, right? AFR?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Those are all the questions I have. So I will open this up for public input. Are there any members of the public who wish to provide comments on this? Don't see a hand going up. So we'll bring it back to the committee. If there's any comments, Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you. I don't have very many comments. I think this is a valuable employee recruitment and retention tool, and I appreciate the staff recommendations to improve it. So I'm happy to move the staff recommendation.
Vice Mayor Hicks.
I agree. It's a great idea and I second it.
So I actually have a concern about the interest only. The AFR has been incredibly low, like around 1%, 2%, 3% for several years now. Granted, in the past, it's been higher, but gosh, if you get a loan and your interest rate is like 1.5%, I think that's an incredible benefit. And so I kind of have concerns about saying it's interest only for a longer period of time when you already have a great rate. I think it's been a long time since a traditional mortgage has an interest rate that low. Actually, I can't think of a time when it's been that low. So I guess I have concerns about making it interest only for a longer period of time. Mayor Ramirez?
I don't know if you were already intending to do this, but maybe it would be helpful to hear a little bit more about staff's rationale or perspective in allowing for that benefit.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, Councilmember Ramirez and Chair Matichak. So I think this is a valuable retention tool for those employees that currently have this loan, which include myself and the city clerk. And it's also a valuable recruitment tool in this environment now when we would be applying this to the potential future department heads or current department heads if we want them to remain in Mountain View, where we all know it's a very high, I would say, could be a barrier to entry in getting any sort of home here when the median home price is $2.9 million. So if we're trying to have employees come to Mountain View and stay in Mountain View, having that cushion, I think, is very helpful to us. And it doesn't mean that it will be approved or used, but being able to talk about that and market that and have that as a benefit. And you are right, Chair Matichak, it is definitely a benefit. And I think it's one that helps distinguish us in Mountain View from other places in order to keep really valuable staff here.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'd feel more comfortable if it was a shorter period of time, maybe initially, like 5 years, instead of 3 years, rather than the 2 tiers. So I'd actually propose that instead. So I guess I feel comfortable with all the other staff recommendations, but can I do a substitute motion here? That the period for interest only is just a standard 5 years, rather than the 3 years, and you can ask for 4 years. Mayor Ramirez?
Thank you. I wanted to give the finance director a chance. I saw, did you raise your hand, Jesse? Did you want to speak to this as well?
I'm sorry, I didn't see his hand raised. Sorry if I missed you.
Thanks. Not a problem. Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, Mountain View, if you look in the Bay Area, is one of the higher priced homes. And so the interest rate, and as you know, interest rates have been actually on the rise significantly over this past year, which is already making it difficult to get into a home. And so having the AFR does counteract that somewhat. And makes it a little bit more feasible to get into it. So I think without that, I think it will lessen the ability for folks to get into a Mountain View or within, you know, a short distance from Mountain View homes. As we know, those prices have been pretty exorbitant.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hicks?
I just wanted to say I'm comfortable with it as proposed. I understand, I appreciate the discussion of risk, and, but I feel like weighing two things. We have a healthy budget, but I think recruiting and retaining staff is the thing I want to work on. So I think that it's worth the money, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I didn't hear a second for the substitute, so we're back to the original motion. And any other comments before we do a roll call vote? Let's see, I lost Kimberly. There she is. Could you do a roll call vote?
Okay, here we go. Committee Member Hicks,
Yes.
Committee Member Ramirez,
Yes.
and Chair Matichak.
No. So that passes.
Passes 2-1, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that closes item 5.1. And we will move on to 5.2.
And this will be presented by Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Logue, City Attorney for the City of Mountain View. I am going to take you through today a few suggested amendments to Council Policy A13 and the Council Code of Conduct. These amendment recommendations come from Council's vote to have the CPPC, or this committee, I'm sorry, consider some amendments related to parliamentary procedure, some amendments related to council attendance at hybrid meetings, in addition to one recommended amendment that I am making with regard to a change in state law. So I will share my screen now and walk you through them. Okay, let me enlarge this. Okay. Hopefully you're able to see Council Policy A13 on the screen. And I will start at the beginning here. under policy section 1B, I am recommending the first amendment I am recommending to this policy addresses council attendance at hybrid meetings. And just to provide a little bit of background and context for this recommended amendment, currently under the Brown Act, as you all are aware, the council is permitted to meet completely remotely through video conference with no physical meeting location. Okay, and prior to this amendment to the Brown Act, if any council member was going to attend a meeting remotely, you needed to post notice in the location where you were meeting remotely and also make that location accessible to members of the public. But right now, in light of this modifications of the Brown Act, you can actually meet completely remotely. I know that the city is considering having hybrid meetings in which council members or staff some could be in person, some could be meeting remotely, and members of the public could always still participate through Zoom or some other video conference method made available by the city. It was the interest of the city council to consider amending council policy A13 in order to require in-person attendance of all council meetings at hybrid meetings. And so a hybrid meeting, for clarification, would not be the video conference meeting where it is fully remote. It would require the adoption of the AB 361 resolution, which we currently adopt in order to meet by video conference. But the hybrid meeting, there would be people attending in person. And so the issue came up of whether or not all council members should be required to attend in person. I have amended this policy to require members of the city council to attend all regular and special meetings of the city council in person unless they're absent with the consent of the mayor or the city council has elected by a majority vote to conduct a meeting by video conference. So there would only be two circumstances in which a council member would be able to be absent or participate by video. In the circumstance in which everybody is participating by video because there has been some determination that it is not safe for even a hybrid meeting, meaning nobody should be in person. So that would happen in the context of assuming there was a surge in COVID-19 and you wanted to go back to full video meetings, or if you are absent with the consent of the mayor. And let me explain why I use that term, absent with the consent of the mayor. You already have a policy, it's required under the charter that if a city council member is absent from a meeting, you are deducted pay for that meeting unless you are absent with the consent of the mayor. So that language is already in the charter. In light of that language in the charter, council had already adopted what constitutes absent with the consent of the mayor, and I did not modify that. And so if I go down here, absent with the consent of the mayor has always meant either city council has consented to the absence in order for the council member to attend a official city business or attend to some other conference or regional board meeting. The council member is ill. The council member is on family leave for birth or adoption of a child. The council member is on bereavement leave, or the meeting was not on the council's formally adopted annual schedule of meetings, meaning it was a new special meeting at which you already had a conflict. So that has already been part of the policy, what absent with the consent of the mayor means. It means one of those things. And so all I did was adopt that into the requirement for attending hybrid meetings. So basically what you would be doing by adopting this amendment is saying all council members have to be in person, attend hybrid meetings in person unless the two things occur, which is you are absent with the consent of the mayor, which is consistent with Charter 503, or the council has by majority vote elected to hold the entire meeting by video conference and everyone's going to be by video. And I'll stop there for questions, because that's a mouthful and it's probably one of the biggest amendments that I am proposing. And I suspect there would be questions related to that area.
Sorry, I just have a process question. I thought we were doing a different item.
Oh,
Yeah, we were actually, apologies from staff, that we were actually going to move Jennifer's item up. And I should have drawn your attention to that. It was going to be 5.2, which is actually Heather's item. So we were taking 5.3 out of order.
Yeah, so I said we were going to do 5.2, and I'm like, "Well, this doesn't sound like 5.2. Okay, so any questions on 5.3?
sorry.
Vice Mayor Hicks? Actually, I'm sorry, I think the mayor had his hand up first. Mayor Ramirez?
Thank you. I had the same question. I wasn't certain if we were supposed to be looking at what was it, K2. Thank you, Jennifer, for the recommended changes. I did have a couple of questions about hybrid meetings and what is under state law. Can we actually compel attendance, physical participation of the council in a hybrid meeting? If a member of the council signed in virtually and they wanted to participate, could the mayor not recognize that member of the council and allow that member to speak?
Well, the charter allows you to compel attendance. So you can compel attendance at any meeting, and it is within the body's authority to adopt these procedures. So if this committee voted in favor of this amendment and you moved it forward to council and the council adopted this policy with this amendment, the council has that authority to compel attendance of all council members. So that is within the authority of the entire council body. So it really takes it outside of just the mayor, right? And if the body adopts this policy and says everyone needs to be in person, then everyone is bound by this policy because you have spoken as a body to adopt that. So it kind of takes it outside of you having to decide whether or not someone who's called in by video conference should be allowed to participate or not. However, a hybrid meeting, it's an anomaly. It is not the video conference meeting, right? The video conference meeting is a special meeting that is authorized under the Brown Act right now. That section of the Brown Act is scheduled to sunset in 2024. Okay. And when that goes away, you go back to having the option to teleconference into a meeting, but again, you have to post where you are and make your location available to the public, right? The hybrid meeting that we're talking about is only allowed by nature of this section of the Brown Act, which is going to eventually sunset. So it's really something that we're coming up with. So you have the authority to compel attendance in person. You don't have to. You can allow them to call in by video conference, but the body can adopt a policy that says you all need to be in person, and that authority is provided by the charter.
Okay, so I that's helpful, and I want to make sure I'm tracking closely. It sounds like that there are two different scenarios. There's the emergency provisions in state law, and for as long as those emergency provisions exist and we adopt the, I can't remember, is it AB 361? I always forget the number, resolution. For as long as those both are true, we really can't compel physical participation of the council because that's the state presumably is overriding the charter requirement to participate in person. So outside of that, though, we can elect to allow public in a regular meeting, right? So outside of the emergency context, basically we go back to a regular meeting scenario, and we're saying we would like to continue to allow the public to participate virtually, but the council then under the provisions of the charter. Is that a fair characterization, or am I completely missing something here?
You're not,
You cut out on me, Councilmember Ramirez, or Mayor Ramirez, sorry.
Oh no, where did I cut out?
So I don't know if the city attorney heard everything you said, but I didn't.
I got you cut out a little, but I heard you, and I think I understand the question. So let me provide a little clarification. The Brown Act is not overruling the charter. The Brown Act is providing the ability for council to adopt a resolution and allow the council to meet fully remotely. Okay, but you do not have to. So it is not overruling the charter at all. You can still compel attendance. That is still authorized under the charter. Even if you adopt the AB 361 resolution, right? And oftentimes, and a lot of cities are adopting them now out of an abundance of caution, right? It's so volatile. You never know when you're going to have to be, remote or in person. Things go up and down. So when you adopt AB 361, it allows you to meet remotely, but it doesn't require you to meet remotely, nor does it overrule any charter provision stating that the council has authority to compel attendance. So the body can still adopt a policy of in-person attendance if the meeting is going to be hybrid or called for an in-person meeting. You can still adopt that policy. But you don't have to. I mean, you can so it really is a body decision. The Brown Act just gives you flexibility to meet fully remote, right? Or to meet remotely, have some of your council members remote without posting their location and making their location available to the public. That's all the Brown Act does, is it's giving you some flexibility. How you decide to run your meetings is really up to the body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Hopefully, my microphone is working a little bit better now. So that is helpful. I think the concern I have or had is in the event a member of the council elects to participate virtually in a hybrid meeting, I wasn't sure if there was a legal risk in denying that member of the council an opportunity to participate. It sounds like, even in a hybrid setting, even with AB 361, we could, the mayor, the council could deny that member of the council the opportunity to participate virtually and actually compel physical attendance. And that's good to know. The other question I have is related to the consent of the mayor. And, I've been on, I've had to do this a couple of times now, and, I'm generally fine with it, but I think different mayors will have sort of different tests that they will apply. And one of the concerns I have with that is treating similarly situated parties differently. And I'm wondering if there's a better way to do this than seeking the consent of the mayor, where we might have a more objective set of criteria that are enforced consistently. Is there any other way of doing this?
So unfortunately, the consent of the mayor language comes from your charter. So the mayor is provided that discretion by charter, and there's nothing we can do about that part. What you have adopted, what the body has tried to do, is to make sure that it is applied equally across the board by limiting your discretion, or the mayor's discretion, whomever that may be at any given time. And by doing that, they've outlined scenarios under which consent of the mayor will be presumed. Okay, so whether you said no or not, it's as if consent of the mayor is presumed under these circumstances. So if a council member calls you up and says, I'm sick, I won't be there today, it doesn't require you to look into that or require a medical note or anything like that. A member that calls in sick is presumed to be absent with your consent, right? A member The only one that requires, actually brings in the entire body is the first one, which is the entire council consents to an absence either before or after the absence in relation to attending to official city business, right? Or attending some regional meeting or a conference. And I think that's fairly common, right? The body is usually aware when a council member is going to go attend some conference, out of state or out of town or something like that and can't participate. And again, birth or adoption, it doesn't provide a lot of discretion. There's a new baby or an adopted child and they're entitled to be absent from the meeting. Same thing with bereavement leave. And then the final one is the one that probably provides the most flexibility, but again, doesn't provide the mayor much discretion, which is if you schedule a special meeting, one that was not contemplated, right, but was necessary, and that council member already has a conflict and cannot attend, that absence is considered excused. So there's not a lot of room for people to be treated differently as you've defined it. You could add to this list of reasons that constitute consent with the mayor. I just wasn't asked to do that, and so I didn't do it. But that is something that could come back to this committee to consider whether or not you would want to add other reasons or other bases that would automatically be considered absent with the consent of the mayor. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's how you can limit the parameters and limit the discretion and ensure that people are being treated equally. Similarly situated people are being treated equally.
Okay, that is helpful. And then the last question is sort of the fringe cases where someone may need an ability to participate virtually, but it's too late to provide the notice that would be required under the Brown Act. So let's say somebody gets COVID or the flu or something, and they have the mental capability to participate, but it would be prudent for them to participate virtually so they don't get the rest of us sick. In that case, would the mayor's consent allow them to participate virtually in a hybrid setting, or is that not a scenario that's really contemplated and they would have to sit it out or come to the meeting and participate physically?
So as drafted, it probably does not contemplate that scenario, which is someone who tests positive for COVID, let's say, you're holding a hybrid meeting in which they would be required to attend in person, but they shouldn't attend in person and they don't want to be completely absent. I could write it in such a way because it's not an absence, right? If they show up by hybrid, it's actually not an absence. And right now, the consent of the mayor contemplates a full absence. I could add language that covered that would allow for virtual attendance with the consent of the mayor, and have these same things apply, right? So maybe birth or adoption, right? Like same thing. Your bereavement leave, you're out of town for a funeral, but you can attend for whatever reason, right? You've decided that you want to participate and you can participate. You are just in another state because the funeral is tomorrow in, New York. We certainly would want a council member that wanted to participate and not be fully absent. I can understand where you would want to allow that person to participate remotely. And I could write that in. But once again, remember that only applies during the time that this section of the Brown Act exists. And it goes away once, if it's actually sunsets on January 1, 2024. So I could, if that is something that you wanted, could amend that to provide for that provision.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all of my questions.
Vice Mayor Hicks.
Yes, so I have questions on the same section. One is, I had thought that, and tell me if I'm using the wrong legal terms. I had thought that given our experience of remote and hybrid meetings, that this is the part I may say wrong, when the exception to the Brown Act or whatever, the one that's been allowing us to meet without posting signs and all that, when that expires, I thought we were expecting maybe some changes so that the posting would not be required in the future. Have you heard anything about possible changes to the legislation?
I think there is legislation or other amendments under consideration, but I have not heard of anything final that will result in a permanent change. Not yet. I haven't heard. But I do think that it is under consideration, and I don't know if Heather is on, if she is more aware of any legislative action that may be taken to make it permanent. Heather, do you?
Yeah, no, not at this time. There have been some bills that have come through and died, but nothing seems like it's gaining a lot of traction in this particular realm right now.
Oh, interesting, because I'd heard some time ago that that people might want to take more advantage of the possibility of hybrid meetings and change that. So, but you all would know more than I would about that. And then I'm not fully clear on the difference between pre-COVID and what you're proposing now. The idea that the mayor can legally compel a council member to come to a meeting. What would have happened if in the first year I was elected, if I had said, Lisa was mayor, I had said, you know, I'm going to go do this and I want to come virtually. And she had said no, she would have been able to compel me. I'm going to take care of my sick mom and I'll come virtually from her house. If she said no, then would I be, I would have to come back and attend in person? Is that, or would it just have been that I would have been docked some pay?
So let me provide some clarification and ask for your example. Let me ask some other clarification. Are you saying that, are you talking about prior to enactment of this portion of the Brown Act that allows everyone to meet remotely? Are you talking about pre-COVID, the pre-COVID situation? Because it's different. Pre-COVID, you would have had to post a sign at your mother's house and make your house open to members of the public to come and sit with you and participate. And again, not that the mayor can compel you. What I'm saying is the council can adopt a policy. The council can compel attendance of council members. So you as a body can adopt a policy that says you need to participate in person. And if you adopt a policy that says that, and you said, I want to participate virtually, I don't want to be here, then it would be our duty to impose the policy to say that you don't have an option in light of this policy to participate remotely. But again, we should, you know, that's why we write in exception. So what Mayor Ramirez just brought up was, you know, an in-between. Right now, it's not written where, you know, if you are able to participate, but you need to do it remotely because you're caring for someone who's sick or you've tested positive, right? And it's not a good idea for you to be near other people. We need to put in some middle line there so that you can participate. But it's not the mayor that prevents you. It's the policy adopted by the body that would prevent you. It would we're just imposing a local policy that's been adopted. So the body has to be on board with this. It is not that the mayor has power to exclude a council member.
So the mayor is just written in there because the mayor is the person who would look over the list of possible reasons and say this fits or doesn't fit.
It's just that the charter has used this terminology as absent with the consent of the mayor. And it's tied to whether or not you get paid when you're absent from a council meeting, right? And so all I did was adopt the same process. You would have an unexcused absence if you were not absent with the consent of the mayor. You have an excused absence if you are. What you're talking about, and I think what Mayor Ramirez brought up is an in-between. You're not absent. You just want to participate remotely. And when does the council want to allow that to happen? And so what I was saying is that it might make sense to include an amendment in here that provides for the ability to participate remotely with the consent of the mayor under these same circumstances. And you can even add circumstances, right? If you're attending a conference out of state and you want to participate via video conference, you would qualify, you'd be able to do that because we're going to adopt these same criteria for allowing you to meet by video conference. If you're ill, but still able to participate, you can join by video conference. Again, if you're on bereavement leave, but still want to participate, you could participate virtually. That's why I'm saying it. I think it probably makes sense to put an in-between in there. So, because that's not an absence, that's providing criteria under which you could participate virtually. It's an exception to the in-person rule.
Yeah. So that's good to hear. I, would actually like to add probably a number of them. I think that, the technology we're using allows us to, I would like staff to be able to come in virtually from time to time. And I would like more ways for council to be able to do some of the things that we, normally do. The ones that I'm thinking of are things like, elder care. Also, when Margaret traveled for sports with her teen children, just general job requirements, doesn't have to be a conference, but for a job, you have to be in another city. I think that I don't want people to be gone all the time, but I want us to be able to have a little more of the flexibility that the technology gives us.
Okay, and just remember that this does not apply to staff. So it applies only to council. So staff wouldn't, yeah.
If we're allowing, and I would like to allow staff I was staff once and I had small children and it was really hard for me to get back to evening meetings in San Jose. And I think staff can often be very effective. I mean, I've found the presentations effective if they're on screen, but if we're giving staff that leeway, I would like to council people honestly are not paid that much. So I would like to give us some of that flexibility as well that I would like to offer to staff.
Okay.
So I think that's my last question.
Okay. So what I think we'll do is we'll just have the city attorney continue, and then if we pause for more questions, but after we're done, then we'll open it up for public comment and then come back to us.
Okay. I think I can move for the rest of these fairly quickly. The next recommended edit is to section 8D of the council policy A13. And this is just a minor edit that I'm recommending to be consistent with general standards for parliamentary procedure. All motions, the council has already always required all motions to have a second, but what I've clarified is that a motion doesn't require a second if otherwise stated herein, because there are some motions under both Robert's rules and Rosenberg's rules that do not require a second. So I'm just clarifying that there are exceptions to that rule in making this amendment. Okay, so I didn't want our hands tied, if a motion that doesn't require a second is made. Okay. Now I'm moving to section 9, general policies regarding meetings and procedures, and I have several recommended amendments here. The first recommendation that is different than the way the council currently proceeds is a recommendation that generally there shall be no more than 3 motions pending on the floor at the same time. This is adopted from Rosenberg's rules. And if I could just back up a little bit, I will say that the parliamentary procedure that has been adopted by council through this policy A13 is a little bit of a combination of both Rosenberg's and Robert's rules. There's nothing wrong with that. Council is entitled to do that. And so what I've done is, rather than upend the entire policy and make it one way or the other, I've continued with the process of mixing the two and pulling out procedures that work best for this council and based on what I've observed and how council currently operates. And so I have Rosenberg's rules recommends not having more than 3 motions pending on the floor because it can get unwieldy. And so I am recommending an amendment to adopt that process so that you have only 3 motions pending on the floor, with one exception, which is not in Rosenberg's rules. And I'm putting this in here that allows the presiding officer the discretion to accept a 4th motion if that motion is considered a privileged motion. And privileged motions are motions that always take precedent. Motions to adjourn, a motion to recess, or a motion to fix a time to adjourn. So imagine a scenario in which there's very heated debate, there's 3 motions pending on the floor, and someone feels like you need a break, right? This would allow that person to make a motion for a recess, just to have a 10-minute timeout for everybody's tempers to cool off and to come back and have a more productive conversation. And so I didn't want to preclude a 4th motion of that nature. So I'm recommending no more than 3 motions pending on the floor, with that exception for the privileged motion as a 4th. And then I've also clarified here that the last motion made shall be the first motion voted on. That is consistent with the procedure, but it is a little bit more confusing the way it's been handled in the past. But this way we know, in order, whoever made the first motion, the second or the third motion gets handled first, then you go to the second, then you go to the first, with the exception of a privileged motion. If that 4th privileged motion comes in, which is a motion to recess, that can be taken over all of the other pending motions. Okay. The next modifications, these are just simple cleanup edits. But the next major modification is adding subsection 9E that clearly allows for friendly amendments. It is already the practice of council to offer friendly amendments. We did not have a procedure that allowed for them, and I have just written that in. Section 9F I've added, which allows for substitute motions. We get sometimes a mix of both motions to amend and motions to substitute motions. Let me clarify the difference, and I think it helps to have a clarification here. A motion to amend leaves the same motion generally in place, but maybe adds to it or deletes from it. A motion to substitute completely would wipe out the motion pending on the floor and changes it, saying, so a motion to substitute would be, for instance, there's a motion pending to adopt staff's recommendation. A motion to substitute would be to deny staff's recommendation. They're polar opposites. A motion to amend would be, I move to adopt staff's recommendation with the following modifications. Okay, so all I've did was clarify that you can have both motions to amend and substitute motions. Okay, moving to section 10, of Council Policy A13. I've just done some cleanup here. Defining what each motion is, it just helps for anyone who's guiding parliamentary procedure to understand the difference between privileged motions, incidental motions, and subsidiary motions. probably doesn't require long discussion. It literally just provides clarification on what each motion is. Under subsection C, subsidiary motions, I've added in 6, which is a substitute motion, and clarified that it requires a second, that it is subject to debate. A substitute motion can be amended, and the vote required is majority vote. So I've just added it to the chart that already exists for all other motions. The next substantive amendment is in section 11 under motions for reconsideration of Council Policy A13. I did not change the way motions for reconsideration are handled. I cleaned up the language. It was written in one full block format of a paragraph, and I split it into subsections so that it is easier to read and understand how a motion for reconsideration can work, who can make a motion for reconsideration, the timing for making a reconsideration, and under what circumstances a motion for reconsideration cannot be made. I can go into more detail if you need to, but I did not change the process. I just clarified it so that it's easier to read and understand. The next significant amendment is to section 12, which is decorum. This is the amendments that I am recommending making in light of a change in state law. There was a recent adoption of legislation that allows for a presiding officer to remove or cause the removal of an individual for disrupting a meeting in accordance with procedures set forth in the California Government Code. I've just adopted that and put it into your policy, saying that the presiding officer may take steps to remove an individual that is disruptive, consistent with state law. I've also cleaned up the section that follows that, which allows for the council as a body to clear a room and continue a council meeting with nobody in the room, to the extent that a group or group of persons was creating such a disruption that the council meeting couldn't proceed, and you cannot fix it or restore order by simply removing one person. In order for the meeting to move forward, you would need to clear the room. So it provides you the option to take both actions consistent with state law. Okay, the next major amendment is we are in section 18, administrative matters, under B2 and 3. This was to provide clarification at the request of council about sharing information between council members. B2 makes it clear that council members should not send written communication on matters of city business to other council members without consulting with the city attorney or the city clerk, because those run a high risk of violating the Brown Act. So it just encourages you to consult with us before sending written communications to a majority of other council members. Subsection 3 provides the process by which you can share documents or information from regional boards or other boards that you participate on. And this is to help, have a written policy so that you can share this information. And what I've done, I've written it in such a way that allows for this to be accomplished in a way that would not violate the Brown Act. And I've made it clear that you send the documents to the city clerk for distribution to the entire council, but you should not modify or summarize or comment on that information. So that information should be forwarded to the city clerk as you got it, without comment. And then it can be distributed to the entire council. And then that way the entire council can have that information, and you can make your comments on it under the appropriate council meeting agenda item. I think sometimes it's 8 or 9 where you're allowed to provide reports, but you can share the documents beforehand in a way that does not violate the Brown Act. And so I've added that in to provide clarity. And the last amendments are just, it's for section, again, we're still under section 18 administrative matters, but we are now under subsection C3 and C4. I am recommending amending C3 to make it clear that the fallback rule for this body will be Rosenberg's rules of order as opposed to Robert's rules of order. So in the event that your council policies do not address a particular matter of parliamentary procedure, we will turn to Rosenberg's rules of order for direction as opposed to Robert's rules, because they are just simpler and easier to digest. And this will help your committees and commissions that do not, that have voluntary members that are not as familiar with rules of parliamentary procedure, because Robert's rules is much easier to read and Rosenberg's rules is much easier to read and understand. So I'm recommending that be your fallback. And then I've just cleaned up language that if there's a conflict between the provisions of this policy and the Brown Act shall prevail. Very briefly, I will move to the Council Code of Conduct. Sorry, I think it's this one. Yes, I am only making a recommendation that you amend one section, and that is to keep it consistent with Council Policy A13. And again, this is with regard to decorum, allowing for you to remove an individual that is disruptive, and to also clarify how the council may clear the room if necessary to proceed with an orderly meeting. So it is I'm literally only recommending that you make changes that are consistent with those that I'm recommending in Council Policy A13. And that's everything. I'll take questions.
Thank you. So are there any questions from the committee? I see, there's Allison. Okay, so I just had, mine are pretty minor. I actually agreed with all of the proposed edits and didn't have any changes to them. But, a little nit, in the Council Code of Conduct, the library board was changed to the Board of Library Trustees, or vice versa. Now I can't remember. And I feel like we're inconsistent on the use of that term. And it said their name was changed. So are we supposed to use their changed name? If we could just take a look at that and make sure we're using the right name, that would be great. If we didn't change it officially, then we should, if we're going to use that other name. And there were also a lot of cleanup items in item 5.2 as well as 5.3 on the same documents. And I was just wondering if they were coordinated, because I felt like I saw a few that were different.
So what happened is the city clerk handled some cleanup items on Council Policy A13 and the Code of Conduct, and I handled some substantive amendments. And what happened is that our changes got combined into one document. So I believe Heather will go through her sort of cleanup items under her item. And so I apologize that's why I was skipping over some of the red line, because it wasn't mine. And that's her cleanup, which I think she'll address. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah, I was going to say, since mine was listed first, I was going to make sure that the committee knew that any revisions that were recommended by the committee would be consolidated together, and any overlap or changes. To your point about the Board of Library Trustees, that's how they're listed in the charter. So we were just changing that for consistency so that it aligns with the charter.
Okay, because I saw the note saying we changed their name, and I didn't know how we did that. Or did we just decide to change it and not do any formal paperwork?
I think, I think that their name has been kind of tossed around in different versions. No formal change, but I think, some people have referred to them as the library board for short, but technically the charter calls them the Board of Library Trustees.
Okay. So if there's no other questions, we'll open it up for public comment. I do not see a hand being raised. So we can close public comment and bring it back to the committee. If there's any further questions or comments on this, Vice Mayor Hicks.
So I'm fine with everything, except that I do think that the first item that we were talking about, I lost the number of it, but that the reasons that council members would be able to come virtually should be expanded. And I even think that that might be something that the full council would want to discuss. But I would certainly like to add ones like job requirement, children's care, elder care, some of those things. I haven't fully fleshed it out, but I would support it if we could expand the list of reasons.
Our recommendation goes to the full council, right? And the full council has the opportunity to discuss it and change it if they want to. Is that correct? I saw some thumbs up. Okay. Sorry, I spoke over you. What was that?
That's my only comment. The rest of it, I'm fine with.
Okay. Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you. So similarly, I think all of these recommendations are very strong, and I'm happy to support all of them. I do think the question of, are there fringe cases in which we would want to allow a member of the council to participate virtually should be elevated to the council for discussion. I went through something like this February of last year when I had just gotten out of surgery and really was in no position to go to a council meeting, but participated nevertheless, which is harder to do if I'm compelled to do so in person. So I think not everyone's going to go through surgery, but if someone has the flu, if someone has contagious illness, I do think it's appropriate if there's a means to participate virtually in a hybrid setting. I think we should allow a council member to do so. But generally speaking, I think once we start moving to something closer to a pre-pandemic normal, there was the expectation that everyone would participate in person, and I think that should be sort of a standing obligation, excluding some, as the vice mayor was describing, some defined scenarios where it would be appropriate to allow a virtual participation. The only minor correction, I guess, maybe this has already been fixed. Sorry if I missed it. On page 90 of the PDF, it's section F of Council Policy A13, conflicting out. Maybe I'm misreading this. It says, after a member advises the council, and then the member shall exit the council meeting. And I was wondering if that should be if the council member shall exit the council meeting. But that's what I'm reading on my PDF. Just a minor typo. If it's already fixed, no worries. Everything else looks good to me.
I can definitely correct that typo. Can you tell me what section is that under again? I'm familiar with the language. I just.
Sorry. 8F.
Okay, 8F. Okay, I can clean that up. And then with regard to I don't know how you want to proceed. What I could do is prepare alternative language for consideration. I don't know how you want to proceed with, are you going to take a vote on whether or not? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like we should decide on what we would want to recommend to council. And then obviously it would be discussed at the council meeting, but I think we should say sort of a straw man to start with. And from my perspective, I think the fringe cases where if you yourself have health issues, and maybe it's not that you're ill, but in case of you had surgery, but you feel well enough to participate in a meeting, but it would make sense for you to not be in the council chambers. I think that's fine to participate virtually. Or I would say if you are caring for a sick family member, and you're the only care provider that really could do that. I think that's, an acceptable reason. I in general feel like, we signed up for this role when we ran, and that the default should be we're here in person, and that there would be few exceptions to that. And so I'm not really looking to have a large laundry list of options for when you can participate remotely. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm not really looking for a large laundry list, but I am wanting ones a little more expanded from what we've done in the past. I think there's some others I think of. I think just if you're sick, I think people used to come in with a cold or flu, and I might rather that other council members not come in if they have a cold or flu. I think that was kind of a work norm in the past. With a cold, I would feel pressured to come into some jobs.
Isn't that already on the list?
What's that?
Sorry, isn't that already on the list?
I don't know. Is sickness, anyway, so that's one. I just think job requirements are another. I don't think job requirements just have to be conferences. And, like if you have to be in another state or another city for a job. I think that childcare as well as senior care, was that on your list? I'm not sure. Those aren't things that I would want people to stay, do remotely every single time, but I think those are acceptable reasons.
Yeah, so I'm fine with the childcare, elder care. I guess I have a different perspective about your job. I think you should be here. Mayor, any thoughts?
So I'm not prepared to, I think, define a list right now. I think I'm in general agreement with some of the scenarios we're describing. So I think, unless I'm mistaken, the city attorney did say we could continue to participate remotely. You could by teleconference. You just have to disclose your location under the Brown Act, right? So it's not like, is that fair? If I elect to participate, outside of the AB 361 provisions, I can do so. We've had council members call in the past from, out of state or out of country. But the difference is we're saying in this case, you wouldn't have to do that because there are some extenuating circumstances where, you don't have enough time to actually get it into the agenda, the disclosed location, or, if you're at your, elderly parents' house and caretaking, you don't necessarily want to disclose, your parents' home address in a public agenda. Is that kind of what we're talking about? Like, you can still participate remotely under ordinary circumstances, you just have to disclose your location?
What I was understanding is that we're talking about participating remotely under the circumstance where you're not disclosing your location or posting it in the agenda, because that's what the Brown Act allows right now. So we're talking about this kind of anomaly that jurisdictions can do, which is the hybrid meeting. And, you can have people in person and remote, and with only posting the one location, the one in person, like council chambers as the location, and then providing a Zoom link. And so what I think I'm understanding, and the way I think I can help move this forward, is what I can do is I can bring to council, if you want to move this forward to council, what I can do is come up with separate draft language on a different piece of paper that would show what we would add in, right? Which would add this exception, this in-between line that allows for council members to participate remotely under a set of circumstances. And maybe I don't include, I don't make an exhaustive list. It's a such as. And then that way, when this entire item is before the full body, you can debate and discuss what is included on or off that list and provide me direction on how to finalize it. So it's going forward. I think the way you could make the motion now, if you wanted to, is make the motion to forward as written to council for consideration with the addition of proposed language for creating a categories under which council members can participate virtually under certain circumstances. And I would bring that for the body's consideration. So the body would have this entire document that you're seeing in front of you, along with this secondary language that could get added in with the council's modifications. So you'd have as is before the body with this proposed addition to consider.
I would be happy to move that, and that would give staff the first bite at the apple, and you can come to council with some of these, I've been calling them fringe cases. I don't know if that's the terminology we want to use, but I'm very comfortable with giving staff an opportunity to come up with that list.
Vice Mayor?
I'll second that. I was going to ask a question, but I don't know that I need to at this meeting. I can ask you offline sometime.
Okay. After the reading the policy, I feel like perhaps we haven't been following it. Maybe because not everybody read it. I know I haven't read every single policy. And I think we've been doing things without really realizing that we weren't necessarily following the policy. So I think it's good to have this discussion as well as with the full council. So we have a motion and a second. So we need to do a roll call vote.
Committee Member Hicks,
Yes.
Committee Member Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Matichak.
Yes,
Motion carries 3-0.
thank you. So, these topics are pretty in depth, that some of them that are on the agenda. And I'm looking at the time here and wondering, I kind of feel like 5.2 is another big topic. So I don't know if people have a hard stop at 4. I don't. I have a hard stop at 6 for the Airport Land Use Commission meeting. But I don't know about staff. Do we try to reprioritize to cover items we think might be quick to get through them and continue some of the items, or do we do the hard ones?
From a staff perspective, I think 5.7 and 5.6 are going to be relatively short items. If the committee would like to consider taking those out of order. And then 5.4, I also believe, Mary, that's a little bit shorter. I think what we could potentially do, Heather, if that's not too challenging, and I'm sorry, since we moved it around anyway, we could just put a pin in 5.2 for a moment. There's no issues on staff's end, and we can go as long as the committee is comfortable with going.
Sorry, you said, so I think 5.5 and.
Let me move the agenda up. I apologize. Let me get that up.
I don't see a 5.7. But I think 5.5 hopefully is a relatively short one. Obviously 5.6 would be. 5.4, not sure. 5.2 to me is kind of a major one. Although I did sort of summarize it because there was a lot of information there. So maybe it's not as big as I think it is.
I don't know if I'm, so yes, so 5.2 is probably the most substantive that we still have. 5.4 would be manageable to probably do within the next half hour. And then the item from John for the Downtown Committee bylaws, that is a relatively brief item. And then item 5.6 was an update associated with, I'm sorry, I misspoke on 7. I said 7. That's just a quick oral update from staff. So 3 of them, I believe we could get through in the next half hour, and then we could have a consideration on behalf of the committee for 5.2. But let me
Okay.
also check in with Heather on, Heather, are there urgency matters associated with 5.2?
Not specifically.
And Kimbra?
Not, I will defer to Heather. on
Okay,
that.
great. So if the committee is open to that idea, we could start with 5.4, 5.5, and 5.6, and then hold on 5.2 to allow you to have some potential additional time for a deeper discussion on that.
Would we be able to have another meeting this calendar year?
We obviously need to provide that item. So we'd need to get it scheduled, and scheduling is usually the challenge. But that would be, the report is already ready to go. So we just need to find a time frame that works well for everyone.
Okay. Okay, so actually, do we want to do 5.5 first? Because it's John's here and I think it's the shortest.
That and staff's quick update. John, if you'd like to jump in, John, thank you.
Happy to. I just have a very quick slide presentation because I think it conveys what we're trying to do. So just give me a second here. Good afternoon, members of the committee. John Lang, Economic Vitality Manager. The item that I am trying to bring up for you is a small change to the Downtown Committee bylaws. The Downtown Committee has been in existence for about 24 years, and over that time, little changes have occurred, and a fairly big change occurred as it relates to an organization in 2020, and that was the Central Business Association, also known as the Downtown Business Association, essentially kind of folded, if you will, and was absorbed into the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce. And we have brought forward to Council those changes. Council did approve the Chamber of Commerce to be the authority for the business improvement business improvement areas last year. And so what we're trying to do is actually clean up the bylaws that reflect the old Downtown Business Association and Chamber. And that change is here. So in the composition of the Downtown Committee, there are, as you see here, 4 groups of folks. And what I want to draw your attention to is this 3rd group. So in the 3rd group, there are 4 positions. 2 of the 4 reflect the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Business Association. Now, this is when they were 2 technically separate organizations. They now are technically one organization. There is a nuance there, but they're technically one. And we want to be fairly transparent with this. So the Downtown Business Association does have an advisory board that is conducting business separately. So the chamber does staff the DBA, and they do operate independently, but they're all within the chamber umbrella. So we're going to focus on 3, but it's going to impact group 1 and group 3. So this is what it is today. And what we're proposing is to do a little shift. And this is literally shuffling deck chairs. So we're proposing to, out of group 3, move the Downtown Business Association membership up into the top group, which is the property owners and business owners of downtown. So we're looking to add an additional seat in that category. So that's a +1. And then the 3rd category, where both the Downtown Business Association and the chamber existed, we're going to reduce 1. So the chamber will remain in that category. So what does that effectively look like is this. We're literally moving deck chairs, but this is to provide a little more transparency between the chamber and the Downtown Business Association. So The red line that's in front of you for the downtown bylaws is looking to increase that top category by 1, which is moving the Downtown Business Association into that category and effectively removing them from category 3. So there still remains 11 seats with clear delineation where the chamber exists and then where the now Downtown Business Association as it exists today in 22. We are seeking your approval so we can move forward to City Council. That is the end of my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, we'll open it up for, oh, actually, actually you answered my question during your presentation. So we'll open up to public comment. If there's any members of the public that want to comment on this. And I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll bring it back to the committee. Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor?
Yes, I second.
Great, thank you. So we can have a roll call. I'm supportive of this, so let's do a roll call vote.
Great. Committee member Hicks,
Yes.
committee member Ramirez,
Yes.
and Chair Matishek.
Yes,
That motion carries 3-0.
great. Thank you so much. Thanks, John. Okay, so should we do the update? Because that's the next short one.
Oh, that one's quite short. So that would be fine if that's okay for the committee. Staff just providing a brief update, letting you know that there are 3 additional remaining items that are on your work plan for this year, which would include some minor modifications that still need to be made to Council Policy A10, which is the authorization of city contracts and agreements. If you may recall, approximately 2 years ago, there were a number of refinements made to that. And some minor additional items are requested by finance. That is a non-urgent item, but we would be having that scheduled for the spring. In addition, there is one additional update, or possibly more than one additional update, that is needed to the Council Policy A15, which is for the shoreline ticket process. And that will be something that we will have for you in the spring. And then lastly, we will continue to provide a brief overview update of any pending items at each meeting so that the CPPC is aware of what their pending items are. And then I will flag for the committee here that there were a number of items that were raised in public comment earlier. And so those will be incorporated into the minutes. And if there's any further action on that, we would need that direction from the committee. That concludes my brief report.
So I think we also refer to the CPPC sort of documenting the comments under item 8. We used to have the practice of limiting it to certain things, and we've kind of gotten away from that. And so we said maybe we should put that in a formal policy. I think we did. We referred that, didn't we?
And Heather, I don't know if that's anything that's included on your current list. I don't have that on mine. But it can certainly be added if that's what the committee desires.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Refining and defining council comments for section 8 on the council agenda, setting some parameters, if you will, if I'm correct on that, Chair.
Yeah, at one of our council retreats, we talked about limiting our announcements to things we did where city money was expended, and then our regional boards, because we can talk about a lot of different things given the opportunity. And we've kind of gotten away from that practice. And so I think we said we were going to, I think we referred that to the CPPC, but hey, that just could have been me hoping we had done that. If nobody else remembers that, I'll bring it up at a council meeting so that we could do the referral. Anybody else remember that?
We can certainly take that as a work plan item.
Can we do that?
We can take, yeah, we can take that as a work plan item.
Are my colleagues okay with that?
If you,
I'm okay with that. I'm just out of curiosity, that feels like it fits pretty nicely in A13, which already has other council meeting related regulations. Do you want to come? Is that something that staff can sort of take a stab at and just go to council with, since we're already bringing it to council, or does it really need to come back to CPPC?
Heather, I think you'd probably want to jump in on this. If I think you'd probably need some direction to define, but
I think Jennifer
Oh,
is
Jennifer.
unmuted for that.
Yeah, I think I do not remember hearing that, but I've only been at one council retreat, so it's possible that it was a prior one. I can certainly incorporate it into my substantive edits. I need some there is something about council disclosures or comments under item 8, and I just need to know what is it that you're looking for more, so I can modify that section.
Can we do that at this meeting? I don't want to.
Yeah,
Okay, so what we had agreed to at the retreat, and this was not the most recent retreat, it was the one before that. Because actually it was when Councilmember Clark brought this up, and he was the one who made the suggestion that we limit our comments to reports from regional boards to which we've been assigned, or to activities we've done where city money has been expended. And I think that we have to disclose if we've attended something that city money has been expended for. That's someplace else, because I feel like I've seen that. But the one about just limiting comments to those two things, that isn't, I think, specified anywhere. I think
so
we're pretty good about doing that, but it'd be good if it was written down.
okay, so limiting comments to about items related to regional boards and situations where you've expended city funds.
Right. So like if you've attended a conference, because obviously that the city pays for that. Ooh, I just froze. Sorry. Did you hear that whole
Okay.
thing? Was it just my video that froze?
for a second, just for a moment.
Okay.
Okay. And if it was referred at a prior meeting, I think I can go ahead and incorporate that in. If there's no objection, I can just incorporate it in and for council's consideration.
Vice Mayor,
And,
did
and
you have-
Jennifer, we'd consider this as a part of your prior item, not a part of item, the current staff update. Okay.
Vice Mayor, did you have comments or questions?
In other words, the kinds of things that wouldn't come anymore would be something from the Council Transportation Committee or somebody, because that's not a regional committee, or something happened at CHAC when you were on the board. Those kinds of things would no longer come to council, is what you're saying.
Well, no, if you're assigned to CHAC, you would report on your attendance at their board meeting. But what you wouldn't report on is, I went to a opening of a business or something like that.
Okay, so what about something like Council Sustainability Committee or Council Transportation Committee?
Actually, I think that actually is a good ad because I think that's helpful for our colleagues. So it would be council committee reports too.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
What we
Forgot about
most of
that.
Okay.
So the only concern I have is it's going to be hard for me to draft this language without knowing exactly what the parameters are. I don't know all the committees that everybody's on and which ones would be, because I don't know that it's not regional boards, it's more than that, right?
I think
Should
it's-
I appointed or?
It's the regional boards and the internal council committees we've been appointed to.
Okay.
Yeah. Vice
So
Mayor.
would
have-
the committee like to have that incorporated into the current work that Jennifer is doing related to item 5.3, or have that item come back?
I'm fine with it being incorporated.
And Jennifer, we're considering this as a part of item 5.3, and then we would still need to do public comment on 5.6, we hadn't wrapped up that item, so we can open that chair at your convenience.
Okay. So we'll open up item 5.6 for public comment if there is any. I don't see any hands being raised. So we'll bring it back to the committee here. So
And
is
then-
there anything else on 5.6?
Nothing else on 5.
Okay, so we'll close 5.6.
And then 5.4.
Sorry, I feel like we're all over the map on this agenda.
We
I'm
kind
so
of bounced
sorry.
around a lot. So 5.4, Mary, is 15 minutes workable on your end?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay.
Okay. I'll do my best to keep it brief for the sake of everyone's time. Please feel free to let me know if there's anything that you'd like me to expand on or if you have any questions. What you have before you today is a draft policy that was prepared at the request of one of the committee members to formalize our policy as it pertains to recognition of events, individuals, achievements, and observance months throughout the city. We currently have our practices, but we do not have a formal policy as it pertains to proclamations and certificates of recognition. So the draft policy that you have identifies some terms when would be appropriate to recognize types of events and issue them. It also sets guidelines for the lead time and information that our office needs to prepare these in a timely manner. As I've stated, the information typically just kind of captures what we've already been doing. You do have some discretion if there's any changes you'd like to make at this time, such as the number of items we would recognize during a single meeting or, things like that. We captured bits and pieces of our past practice as well as incorporating some details from policies from neighboring agencies that we found that were conducive with our priorities. I'm happy to take any questions. I also have Deputy City Clerk Wanda Wong on the call, who is familiar with how we've been doing things historically, if you have questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I think I had a couple. I guess I was wondering, when we do proclamations or letters or certificates of recognition, how do we have a lot that are just initiated by the mayor or a council member versus people asking for them?
I wouldn't say so. Typically, the ones that we've seen that are issued on a regular basis are the ones that carry over year to year. So a specific awareness month or awareness week for items that we have recognized on an annual basis. We occasionally do receive requests from specific individuals or organizations, and the mayor always has the discretion to decide if it's something that is relevant to the city and to the area worth recognizing by the city. But I would say the majority of the requests that we receive are ones that we're anticipating and that are honored annually.
Okay. City Clerk Blazer, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna build on that. Of course, this is gonna vary from mayor to mayor. So it'll depend on, what the preference of the mayor is and how much is brought forward by the mayor. But I do agree that a lot of it is year over year recognitions and, certificates for Eagle Scouts and things of that nature.
Okay. I guess that's the only question I have. So before we get into comments, we'll open it up for public input. If there's any members of the public who want to comment on this item. I don't see any hands being raised, so we'll close public input and bring it back to the commission. If there's any other questions or comments, Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you. I feel badly dominating all of these, but I'm happy to move the staff recommendation. I kind of wish we had this early in the year because I turned down a lot and it never feels good to turn somebody down.
Vice Mayor Hicks.
So I second that motion.
So I think I was the one who asked if we could have a policy around this. I know the year I was mayor, we had some requests that I didn't really see the connection to Mountain View. And I think we did very few proclamations and certificates of recognition that year. I also felt like I wanted to be incredibly sensitive to staff's workload. And so I was looking for a policy that the mayor could sort of rely on if they felt like they wanted to pass on a request. Of course, the mayor always has the option to, do what they want to do. But, I felt like I could have used something to say, well, this doesn't really fit, the criteria of what we traditionally do. And I felt like in recent years, we've done a lot more than we used to in the past. And I'm very concerned about the amount of time that it takes to put those together and the amount of time then we dedicate to meetings, going through proclamations and presentations. I personally would like to have fewer of those so that we're being respectful of staff time and that so the council meetings are perhaps a little bit shorter. So actually I would modify while this might be the practice we had more recently, I'm not sure this was the practice we had before that. And so I actually would like to kind of tighten it up a little bit so that perhaps we do fewer of these. So I'm kind of wondering what my colleagues think of that. Vice Mayor?
Well, it sounds to me like you have some specific, that all sounds reasonable. I haven't been mayor, so I haven't been through it myself. It sounds like it might be a useful tool to be able to refer to, but it also sounds like you've thought it through, the modifications, so I'd like to hear what they are.
Sure, I can do that. So on proclamations, I would change the second one, B, to call public attention to a significant Mountain View community event, period. And on C, I would say to highlight a special period of observance, celebration, or recognition for Mountain View or national occasions that are important to Mountain View. So basically that would be eliminating regional and state. And then I would also, we heard a little bit earlier that we could potentially limit the number that are discussed or presented at a council meeting. And I would add under 1 at the very end that a general guideline is 1 to 2 presentations per council meeting. And the same thing with the certificate of recognition, that a general guideline is 1 to 2 at a council meeting. I feel like the caveat with all of this is the mayor can really do what they want to do. So they can ignore the policies and do more or less, but to have some sort of guideline is what I was thinking. Mayor Ramirez, whoops.
You want to go first, City Clerk?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
No,
see.
it's okay. Don't worry about it. I just wanted to clarify 1 to 2 presentations for proclamations or certificates. Is that combined or 1 to 2, of each?
I was
would be
thinking
helpful.
I was thinking of combined.
Combined. Okay,
We do 1 or 2. Yeah.
got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Sorry. Your hand
Oh.
sort of matches your background. Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you. I'm in general agreement with those modifications. I think a guideline makes sense. I had tried, sometimes it was difficult to balance them, and that's how we ended up with 4 in a meeting, which I had really wanted to avoid. And it's challenging when there are often temporal components to the proclamations. And if we're only meeting, twice a month, then we might miss out on, some kind of week of significance. So I do think just as a guiding principle for staff, 1 to 2 makes sense. And then for B, to call public attention to the significant, Mountain View event, or I like keeping the word or including the term Mountain View to make sure we're focusing on things that do have significance to Mountain View. I don't have a problem with including service or program, though, just in the event that there is something that we want to elevate, to the community's awareness. But keeping it specific to Mountain View makes sense. And then for C, there may be a regional or state occasion that is worthy of consideration, and I guess we would know if it comes to our attention, right? Or none of these preclude the possibility of going outside of the guidelines. So I'm okay with all of those recommendations. Focusing on Mountain View, and then just keeping it clear that the mayor could decide to include a different recognition or proclamation if the mayor at the time feels it's appropriate. So happy to add those into the motion.
Thank you. And I see a head nodding from the vice mayor. So, Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that preceding the bullet for item 1, it does note on there that things should be specific to Mountain View. So, that goes for both the certificates of recognition and the proclamation, which is why the text wasn't dropped down. I'd be happy to include it in there as well. But yeah, we want to make sure that it's in line with the council priorities, that it does relate to the city, but also does give discretionary power, as Mayor Ramirez mentioned, that there may be events that they would like to recognize.
Okay, yeah, I think it's worth repeating down below, but yes, it is up above. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so any other comments or anything? Nope. Okay, so a roll call vote on that one.
Committee Member Hicks,
Yes.
Committee Member Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Matichak,
Yes.
motion carries 3-0.
Okay, thank you. It's like I've lost my agenda on my table here.
So the one item that would remain, it was the 5.2 that will carry over to the next meeting.
Right,
And
we
then
have 1 minute. You think we could do 1 minute? No.
And then we're on item 6, committee staff comments, questions, committee reports.
Are there any? Nope. Okay. Then I guess we are adjourned at 3:59. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This was, I think, a good discussion. There was a lot to it. So thanks very much. Bye now.